Hi, this is Carl from the Archaeology Review. Today we're going to talk about the Apis bulls of Saqqara and Egyptian stonemasonry. In this channel, I explore the stories behind fake, fantastic, and even fraudulent archaeology. I'm a professional archaeologist that's been blogging about archaeology and pseudo-archaeology for nearly 20 years, but I'm new to the YouTube thing. So if you like what you see, be sure to hit like and subscribe. If you have questions or suggestions for topics or content, feel free to comment below. Be sure to share this video with your friends or enemies. So, on to today's topic, the Serapeum of Saqqara. Way back in 2018, before COVID, like ancient history, a friend asked me a question specifically about these large granite caskets for bulls. He wanted to know how ancient Egyptians could carve granite so precisely. And I think this is a fair question, and one that can be hard for the average person to wrap their head around, especially when they encounter these 70-plus ton granite boxes for the first time. These boxes, or sarcophagi, the plural of sarcophagus, are each fashioned from a single piece of granite, and they're huge. First, let me give you a little background on these sarcophagi. In the 1850s, Auguste Mariette set out on an expedition to Egypt with the mission to obtain local manuscripts for the Louvre. Having no experience at this sort of work, Mariette met with little success in his endeavor, and it was beginning to look like he'd have to return to France empty-handed, and maybe a little embarrassed. Before his return, he decided to make a side trip to Saqqara, where he stumbled upon one of the sphinxes from one of the famed avenues of sphinxes. There's an avenue in Luxor, and there was apparently an avenue of sphinxes right in Saqqara as well. The head of this particular sphinx was just sticking out of the sand. Soon after, Mariette assembled a team, removed a buttload of sand, uncovered the avenue of sphinxes, and followed it to the underground tomb complex of Saqqara with its 28 sarcophagi for the Apis bulls. Carved variously from granite and diorite, each sarcophagus was made to entomb one mummified bull and probably weighed at least 70 tons. The initial tomb and its sarcophagi were built by people working for Kamweset, one of the sons of Ramses II, around 1279 to 1213 BCE during the 19th dynasty. He ordered that it be dug with side chambers large enough to contain the 28 granite sarcophagi. A second tunnel was dug during the 26th dynasty between 664 and 610 BCE and is today considered the greater vault, while the first is considered the lesser vault. During the 30th dynasty between 378 and 361 BCE, the Avenue of Sphinxes was added with 600 sphinxes flanking the boulevard leading up to the ceremonial site. So how did Egyptians in the 13th century carve granite, one of the hardest stones in Egypt? They used copper saws and drills, but the copper didn't do the cutting. Granite has a hardness of 7 on the Mohs scale, as does quartz. Copper and bronze saws and drill tubes are fully capable of cutting softer stones like steatite or calcite, but they're wholly insufficient when it comes to cutting hard, igneous rock like granite or diorite. Something more was needed. And it may have actually been Egyptian dentistry that arrived at the answer. It's no secret that the Egyptians took great care of their teeth. They may even have invented the first toothpaste around 5000 BCE, or at least that's what I've read on the internet. We know that's all true, right? They almost certainly noticed that their teeth were often eroded and abraded, probably from sand particles that found their way into bread. Whatever the process of discovery, it was definitely sand that was used. The striations and filings, along with sand and copper particles found in the tailings, associated with the boreholes and grooves of unfinished cuts and quarries, confirm copper and or bronze was used with sand as an abrasive to cut and drill hard stones, including granite. The copper blades and tubes were made by pouring molten copper into sand molds, then pounding them into shape. But the actual cutting teeth were already available by the millions in Egypt, all for the low price of scooping just a handful of sand. Not only was evidence of this sand-cutting abrasive found by everyone from Flinders Petrie, who was initially skeptical, to modern archaeologists, along with the telltale green-tinted copper particles mixed in, but it was ultimately tested by archaeologists like Dennis Stocks and Mark Lehner. Flinders Petrie, often considered the father of modern archaeology, first noticed green stains on the sides of saw-cut stones from the 4th dynasty in Giza. He also noticed that the grains of sand were also stained in green. Likewise, Alfred Lucas discovered some evidence of copper used on drill cores that were about 8 centimeters in diameter. This was at Saqqara on the same red granite used for the Apis sarcophagi. On the outside of the core were green patches from the copper tube that drilled the core. When copper is initially poured, it has a shiny salmon pink color that later turns red as it oxidizes. Then it becomes a reddish-brown, followed by a green tint as it fully oxidizes. This patina is copper carbonate, and it's very distinctive among the fine grains of sand and dust created from sawing and drilling. So what Dennis Stocks and his team found was that a staff with a copper tube fixed at the end could drill at a rate just over 5 cubic centimeters per hour. To create the interior of the sarcophagus, the stonemasons of Egypt would have created a series of drilled holes adjacent to each other and outlining the inside perimeter of the box that was already cut. Then, adding a few more holes to the center, that would leave a perforated section that they could then pound out with stone mallets or mauls. The core for each hole is removed by tapping in copper or bronze chisels until it simply breaks loose. This was probably done in a succession of levels until the desired depth was achieved. The interior was then smoothed with flint chisels and punches, followed by burnishing with sandstone, then a polishing with the fine powdered tailings from the saw and drill work, and then ultimately with a final polish using leather laps and mud. This was anything but a simple process. In fact, it was complicated and labor-intensive, but this is what one did in ancient Egypt. It probably wasn't uncommon to spend an entire lifetime working on a single temple, or for a son to continue working on a sarcophagus that a father began. Today, there are those who would have you believe that there is something far more mysterious at work than the sheer hard work and natural clever innovation of humanity. That somehow there is at play some sort of hidden high technology, whatever that means. That these people couldn't possibly have created what they did on their own without some sort of help. I think this cheapens what we can expect of ourselves. Ancient Egyptians weren't some sort of primitive civilization. They may not have had the technological advances we take for granted today, but they had a keen understanding of the world around them and the very same brain that we have today. I've watched several videos of people like Brian Forrester, who stated over and over that Egyptians didn't have the technology to accomplish what we've just talked about. In fact, Forrester says that since dynastic Egyptians didn't have the technology, things like granite sarcophagi must have been carved before dynastic times. This isn't a logic that makes any sense, but it's one meant to perpetuate ignorance and mystery at the same time. Mystery is a lot of fun, and there's a bit of a mystery monger in us all. But there's no need to invent it where it doesn't exist. As an archaeologist, I'll be the first to tell you that we don't know everything. Far from it. In fact, the information we do know about the Apis bulls, the ritual and ceremony that surrounded them, and even the history of Auguste Mariette tell stories that are not only fascinating, but ones that create lots of questions. Like, how did bulls get to be so revered in the ancient world? What were the differences between social elites and just the average Egyptian citizen in how they performed rituals and ceremonies, or even in just how they viewed the importance of the bulls? Were they more important to social elites than common citizens, or vice versa? And how far did the influence of the Apis bull cult travel? Was it just local, throughout Egypt, or did it travel throughout the Near East? Thanks for watching. If you like this video and you would like to see more from me and the Archaeology Review, please hit the subscribe and like buttons. That'll definitely motivate me to create more content. Feel free to leave comments or questions, and if you'd like to read some of my other work, please visit my site at thearchaeologyreview.com or ahotcupofjoe.net. I'll put the links in the notes below.